Well, good morning, Icon. Welcome to Icon Online. I'm so glad to have all of you here with us today as we go into our second week of Advent. Today marks the beginning of week 2 of the Advent season. And like we talked about last week, Advent is the time leading up to Christmas when, in our faith tradition and the Christian tradition, it's when we take a posture of waiting on Christ's coming. So it's a time where we are reminded that Christ came to us as a baby thousands of years ago as Emmanuel, God with us, and yet we are still in many ways waiting on Christ to come once more, to show up in our circumstances, to continue to show up and to come and to be with us into our lives today. And today, the second week of Advent, the theme is peace. And this peace that we're referring to is shalom. And we've talked about shalom a lot of times here at Icon, but it's this idea of this wholeness that Christ brings to the world. It's a peace that is both individual and collective, where we get to experience redemption and wholeness. And it's this kind of where things are made right between us and God and us and our neighbor and us and the earth. And that is what Christ came to bring, was this idea of wholeness where there is human flourishing for all. And we know that there is much division in our world. There are many ways in which we are living fragmented lives. There are systems that oppress and relationships that are broken, and our world is in desperate need of this shalom, this peace that we find in the presence of Christ in our lives. And if we're going to talk about peace and entering into this way of shalom that Jesus came to the world to bring, we have to first talk about foundations. And we all know that anything that we intend to build must be built upon a solid foundation if we want it to have any kind of longevity. And we know this to be true in the world around us. For instance, if you've ever had a home built, or when you think about a house being built or any kind of a structure being built, it is of utmost importance that the foundation is laid correctly and that it is strong and sturdy and firm. I don't know how many of you have ever, bought a home before, but a lot of times if a home has significant foundational issues, that's enough for a buyer to reconsider and to say, we're going to pass on this, because not only is that could that be detrimental to the home itself, but it's a very, very expensive and costly fix to go in and to have to reorder and redo the foundation when there's something that is wrong with the foundation in the first place. We know that if there are cracks in it, or if it is laid on ground that isn't level, then over time, that foundation is going to deteriorate and it will put the entire structure at risk. And foundations, they matter in building structures in our world, but foundations also matter when it comes to our lives and to our relationships. And whether it's a friendship, a marriage, or a partnership, a family relationship, or your relationships with coworkers, or with you and your boss, or between business partners, parenting relationships, the foundation upon which the relationship is built is of utmost importance in order for that relationship to be healthy and to last for the long haul. Things that are important in this solid foundation are things like trust, like good communication, healthy boundaries, forgiveness, love, empathy, grace. These are all elements that can help build a trustworthy and solid foundation. I mean, for me, when I look at my closest friendships that I have in my life, most of them have lasted over the course of the past 15 to 20 years. And I can see when I look at those relationships, I can see that the reason that they have lasted and the reason that they are thriving is because they have been built on a foundation of mutual trust, of respect for one another, of love for one another, of allowing each other to be fully who we are. I see that in my friendships. I see it in my marriage. I see it in all kinds of relationships in my life. And I'm sure if you take a step back and look at the relationships in your life that are healthy and are strong and are thriving, that you can look at the underlying current of those relationships and see that there is some foundational elements that were put in place that ensured that those relationships could thrive. And also, not only are foundations important in building structures, not only are they important in our relationships, but foundation is really important when it comes to our faith as well. And sometimes when we talk about having a firm foundation in our faith, sometimes we can take that to mean that we need to have a faith that never wavers, that it never changes, that we're always sure, that we don't doubt. But that's not what I mean when I'm talking about building a solid foundation for our faith. What I mean is if we desire to have a faith that is helpful to us and to those around us and to the world, if we desire to have a faith that is fulfilling, a faith that serves us well, that serves the world around us well, that leads us toward love of neighbor, that connects us with the divine, if that's the kind of faith that we desire to have, then that faith itself must have a solid foundation that can support it. And, the faith that I used to have eventually fell apart because the foundation it was built upon was faulty. When I look back to kind of the shifts and the evolution of my faith over the past several years, I can see that some things that my faith used to be built upon were things like certainty. My faith was built on a foundation of fear. I did things or didn't do certain things out of a fear of God being mad at me or out of being kind of losing my belonging. It was built on a foundation of like a sense of rightness, where it was really important that I was right and that I had the absolute truth and that I knew exactly what that was. My faith was built on a foundation of I was judgmental. It made it very difficult for me to not judge the people around me who lived differently or who believed differently than me. It was very individualistic. It was centered around me and myself. It was othering and quite honestly, a bit elitist. Those were the kind of foundational elements of my faith. And so when the doubts got too big and the questions got more difficult and I started opening my eyes more and more to the world around me, and my lived experiences started to change, I realized that what I had built my faith on could no longer hold the weight of these things. And not to mention the fact that the foundation that I built my faith on made it very difficult for me to actually love my neighbor well and to work for justice and to work for the liberation of all people. And so things started to crumble and kind of fell like dominoes. And I came to a place where I realized that if I wanted to live a life of faith that truly made my life and the world around me better, that something had to change. I had to go back and do some foundational work when it came to my faith. And so that's what I did, and it's what I am still doing. And it's these elements that I have found that have been helpful for my faith are things like curiosity and inclusion and generosity and a desire for justice and an authentic love for neighbor and love for God. And these are the kinds of things now that I want my faith, the foundation of my faith, to be built upon. No longer certainty, but curiosity. No longer fear, but love. No longer judgment and exclusion, but inclusion. See, it's these elements that are the basis for helping me work toward having an expression of faith that pushes me closer to Jesus and to the way of love, and that's curious and unafraid of doubts and questions, that is deeply communal, and that desires liberation for all. And I haven't arrived. It's not like I'm looking at my faith going, well, it's all perfect now. Like I hope that 5-10 years from now, I look back and see growth and change. I hope that I change my mind on some things. I hope that my faith looks differently, that it pushes me closer and closer to love and to liberation and to justice. But now these things, even though I still have a lot of work to do, even though I'm not perfect and I haven't arrived, I believe that the foundation that I'm building is the kind that will hold up over the long haul. And see, this matters because the foundation that we have is going to determine the way that we live out our faith. And the way that we live out our faith will be a direct outflowing of the kind of foundation we have built. And this matters because the way that we live out our faith impacts how we show up in the world and how we treat other image bearers of the divine. It impacts it, so it matters. This foundation that we build matters. And if we desire to work for peace, for that shalom, for ourselves and for others, if we desire to see shalom come to pass and for there to be wholeness in our own lives, in our own relationships, and in the world around us, then we need to be attentive to the foundation from which everything flows. Before Jesus started his ministry, there was one who came before him who laid a foundation for Jesus's work and his ministry. And actually, we talked about this person a few weeks ago, but John the Baptist actually helped to pave the way and to prepare the hearts of the people for the work of shalom that Jesus came to do. And even before John was born, his parents received a word from God that John was to fulfill an important role. And after his birth, his father prophesied about John's purpose. So we're going to read a bit from the scriptures this morning about this story. We're going to go to Luke chapter 1, verses 67 to 79. And it says this: John's father, Zechariah, was filled with the Holy Spirit and prophesied, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he said through his holy prophets of long ago, salvation from our enemies and from the hand of all who hate us, to show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant, the oath he swore to our father Abraham, to rescue us from the hand of our enemies and to enable us to serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all our days." And right there, he's talking about this horn of salvation that Zechariah is referring to is Jesus. And then he goes on to say, and he's talking now to his son John, he says, "And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go on before the Lord to prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven, to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace." See, Zechariah here is casting this hopeful vision for his child, and he is laying a foundation for his life and his ministry. And we see in the scriptures that then John goes on to help lay a foundation for Jesus, who will guide us all toward the path of peace. And we, in turn, also have the opportunity to help lay a foundation for others. We can cultivate lives and a faith that invites others to experience love and curiosity and inclusion. We can create space out of our lives that give others permission to be fully who they are, to bring their doubts and questions, to widen the table, and to work for justice and shalom in our world. We get to be a part of that. And for the next few minutes, what I would like to do is I want to invite all of you into a time of reflection. And so what we're going to do now is a Sanctified Art, which is the resource that we're using for Advent, has a beautiful theme song that they have provided for us with a really pretty video with just some art images, and it's just really, really beautiful. And so we're going to, in a second, we're going to play that video, and during that time, we're going to give you a time for reflection. And I have some questions that I'm going to have Craig, he's going to go ahead and put those in the chat because he's hosting today. So Craig's going to go ahead and put those questions in the chat so that you can have a chance to kind of look at them and jot them down if you want. And maybe you want to read them and write down your response in a journal, or maybe you just want to kind of read the questions and just ponder them internally. However you want to use this time, obviously, is totally fine. And then after this time of reflection, we're going to come back together for a time of communion and then a closing candle lighting liturgy. So hopefully you have your communion elements. If you don't have them yet during the video, it would be a great time to go ahead and grab them. But I'm going to go ahead and read the questions for you first, and then we'll go ahead and go to the video. And again, the questions will also be in the chat for you to be able to see those questions and contemplate. But here are the 4 questions. The first thing, what are some things that make up the foundation of your faith? Question number 2, was there someone who helped to lay a foundation of faith for you? And how has that impacted you? Question number 3, how can you help to lay a foundation of love for others? And then question number 4, in your community, what are some ways that love can overflow into action? So here we're going to go ahead and Craig's going to put those into the chat. We're going to go ahead and play this video for you to have a time of reflection, and then we'll be back here in just a few minutes.
I can't describe the way I've been feeling. Everything all turned around inside my head. Longing to find some magical sign, the key to my deepest desire, the home that my body is left. I've waited on my victories, despite the love that leads to no avail. I've tried to find my voice like Zachariah, but it comes out weak and pale. Can we build a place for all the lost who long to be held inside the arms of love, the joy that sets us free? Maybe I'm on my own, but wherever you are, I am home. One night, it seems like a lifetime ago, some travelers far from their home searched for a room and a bed. Snow fell against the light of a star. Without any offer or invite, he came to give life to the dead. Can you imagine all the weight of all of the world, yet no one welcomes you in? You cast away and cast aside, a dear to you, you cherish us just as we can. We can build a place for all the lost who long to be held inside your arms of love, the joy that sets us free. How are we ever alone? Wherever you are, we are home. describe the way I've been feeling. Everything all turned around inside my head.
Oh, such a beautiful video and song, and I hope that that was helpful for you to have just that time to really reflect and kind of internalize some of the things that we've been talking about today. And we're going to close out today by doing a couple of practices together. The first is we're going to take communion together. And we're doing that in our in-person service today, and so we also wanted to do it with all of you. And so hopefully you have your elements with you, whatever it is that you had on hand. And here's what I'm going to do is with the Sanctified Art has given us a beautiful prayer called Prayer of the People. And so I'm going to first read this prayer for us, and then we will receive communion together. God of days gone by and the God of the here and now, we understand the story of Zechariah. We know what it's like to be speechless. We know what it's like to be awestruck. We know what it's like to change plans and leave everyone whispering. What we don't always know is what the next right step is. We crave your voice in our ear, guiding our steps, revealing the way. So today, God, we pause to give you thanks for the things that leave us speechless, for love at first sight, for the moments when the doctor says the scan is clear, for the family that runs to meet us at the airport and welcomes us home, for every small miracle and concentrated beauty in our life. We are awestruck. We are speechless. We are so deeply grateful. But in between whispers of deep gratitude are people who are speechless for other reasons. We are speechless because of the suffering and despair, grief and loss, violence and injustice in our world. With every young person killed in the street, we lose our breath. With every threat of violence, we lose our words. With every updated report on climate change, we lose our peace. And the cycle goes on and on and on. Creator God, who breathed life into us, move between us and our despair. Give us a voice to speak gratitude in the face of beauty and justice in the face of destruction. Give us words to heal where there is hurt and to invite where there is isolation. There are so many things that leave us speechless, O God, but we never lose your words of love and hope. So today, as we take communion and we reflect on this idea of peace and foundations and what it means to sometimes be awestruck or speechless at the good or the bad things that are happening around us. Today, as we take communion and we remember the cross and that Jesus chose the most radical act of love, that even as he was being executed, he modeled for us the way of nonviolence and self-sacrificing love that leads us toward the path of peace, the path of wholeness for all humanity. So we remember that Christ came and that Christ will come again and show up in our lives and in our world to redeem all things. So you can go ahead and take the cup and the bread. So today we take the bread and we remember the body of Christ given for us. Let's eat together. And then we take the cup and we remember the blood of Christ shed for us. Let's drink together. And now we're going to end our time together, just like we did last week, with a candle lighting liturgy. So if you have a candle near you, you can go ahead and get your candle and your lighter or your matches, and we're going to go ahead and light our candle. So I got mine here. And I'm going to read this liturgy for us. As we reflect on the foundation of our faith in our lives, we gather together around the candle of peace. The home we long for is a home that knows peace, peace that rests between us and our grief, peace around our anxiety, peace between us and our self-criticism, peace amidst our relationships, peace at the core of our being, peace hovering through and in our world. The home we long for is a home that knows peace. So today we light the candle of peace as a reminder and as a prayer. Let it be so. Amen. I love that line of peace hovering through and in our world. What a beautiful idea to carry with us this week as we contemplate this idea of peace and what it means to build a solid foundation that can move us further down that road, move us further towards that path of peace. And so this week, I invite you to contemplate those things with me. And actually, we have a really cool resource for you. We do have an Advent devotional that came with the Sanctified Art. It's beautiful, beautiful artwork, some daily practices. I know that we're a week behind, so we missed a week. But that's okay. We can start fresh today. So if you would be interested in that, we do have digital copies that we can email out to you. So if you would like a digital copy of our Advent devotional, just send us an email at info@iconchurch.com and just tell us that you would like us to send you a copy of that, and then we will do that and get that in your hands. So thank you all so much for being with us today. I hope that you all have a fantastic week. Go in peace, and you will all be on my heart and in my mind this week. I'm going to be praying for all of us as we move forward, that God would guide us further along this path of peace. Love you all so much, and I'll see you back here next week.
Man, today was one of those days where it just felt like we could exhale. I don't want to take a lot of time because I really am personally still reflecting on today's message and just our time there at the end. There's something about liturgy that really speaks to me, especially during Christmas time, and I don't know if you can relate. But I wanted to draw attention to one comment that I think a lot of us can probably relate to. And it so resonated with me. And I don't know if it was Tom or Janine, because it's both of you listed there. But they just said, my foundation is currently under construction. And the only thing I know for sure is this new one will be a better one. And I so resonate with that. And I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but the tradition that I was brought into, it wasn't the tradition that I grew up in, but the tradition that I was brought into and eventually became a pastor and followed very closely, really did bring with it a lot of anxiety. And so stripping away things to get to the foundation was not a peaceful process. And so this idea of peace, it really speaks to the deepest parts of my soul. And, when I think about it, they just said, Janine, that doesn't surprise me either. Love you, Janine. You're the best. I remember when I was first introduced to the work of Brian McLaren, and he said that in a lot of traditions, especially the evangelical tradition, beliefs are like bricks in a wall. And when you remove one brick, it actually degrades the structure, the entire structure. And so removing one brick is a very painful and labor-intensive process. And the wall is never the same again after that. The way that I like to refer to it sometimes is a house of cards theology, that we've built this house of cards. And if you pull one aspect out, the entire house crumbles and it feels like we have nothing left. And I just remember getting to that place where I allowed everything to crumble. And what was fascinating for me was the only thing that was left was Christ. Everything else I had questioned and stripped away everything else, and I was left with a singular foundation of Christ. This Christ of love and following the way of Christ. And I didn't know a lot of things, but I knew that the foundation of my faith was still solid, because the foundation of my faith wasn't in somebody's doctrine or somebody's interpretation of the Bible. It was in Christ, this messy and amazing experience of what it means to follow Jesus within community. And that started to bring peace to me again. So wherever you are and whatever you're going through, I want to pray this benediction over you as we close our time together. It's one that I do frequently at the end of our time. And it just says this, and I have to do it because it starts with these words. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you. Let me say that again. May the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever you may be sent. May you be guided through the wilderness, protected through the storm. May you be brought home rejoicing at the wonders shown to you. May you be brought home rejoicing once again into our doors. Next week, we're going to be continuing our series on Advent, and really excited about this series close to home. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll see you right back here next Sunday at Icon Church Online. Take care, everybody. Bye.